devastating wildfires in Los Angeles on January 7th were incomparable in so many ways. It took over 3 weeks to actually get them fully contained. In the Palisades area, over 6,800 properties were damaged, and now the recovery process is in process. And we're delighted to be joined today by someone who knows that recovery process intimately. I'm delighted to be joined by Colonel Brian Sawser from the Army Corps of Engineers. You are actually in command of the recovery over there in regards to the Army Corps of Engineers. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So just really basically, the Army Corps of Engineers, what is its role? What does it do? Where does it go? And why are you here?
So the Army Corps of Engineers, you can trace back to the origins of our nation. And it's really unique for any army, to include westernized armies, to have this component of your active duty force that also has a crucial role in the infrastructure of the nation, in inland waterway systems. So the Corps of Engineers has been around for the duration of our nation's history. We consist of about 35,000 Army civilians and in and around 700 uniformed officers. We are spread across the continental United States to include the globe as well. And we really exist to solve the nation's engineering challenges. That's why we exist, and we have existed for the past 250 years. So you can look at the Hoover Dam, you can look at the Mississippi River, you can look at the Washington Monument. Those were all projects by the Corps of Engineers. And so not only do we have that infrastructure role, civil works for the nation, we also have environmental stewardship and permitting and regulatory actions for the nation to protect the waterways. But we also have a role in a natural disaster, a declared emergency by the president. And so as a secondary mission, even though we're spread across the United States, performing these missions continuously all the time in different parts of the country, in a time of emergency, we are able to really harness the expertise that we need for that type of disaster and deploy quickly to that disaster and respond at the request of a state, the governor, of the federal government. We work here under the authorities of FEMA and essentially performing the execution of the debris removal in this case. And so that's the role of the Corps of Engineers. We do have a daytime mission that's always continuous, building out the infrastructure of the nation. But in times of emergency, we can't deploy forward and come to places like Southern California for a disaster response like this.
So you've seen a lot in your career. When you came to Southern California, when you came to, we're going to focus today on the Palisades fire, when you came and you saw that for the first time, despite the fact that you've seen things all over the world, including what we spoke about earlier, that you've been to Eastern Europe and you've seen the damages of war, what was your immediate impression when you looked up on those hillsides and you saw what had happened?
Yeah, so having served in the operational Army for the vast majority of my career, as you alluded to, overseas, certainly seen an array of disasters, usually war-torn countries. And I will tell you that I had that same feeling when I came here to Southern California and viewed the Palisades fire impact area. Absolutely complete devastation. And I think as a citizen, seeing my fellow citizens in pain and suffering and seeing that they had lost everything, that certainly struck a different chord. So from the Corps' perspective, we take this mission incredibly personal. There's a district headquarters here in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles district of the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Our employees that work for that district, several of the employees lost their homes. More employees were displaced from both of these fires, Palisades and Eaton fires. So it was not only a national response for us, it was also personal. And so to really have the trust of Southern California and the state of California to come in here and perform this mission means a lot to us, and we take that as a very, very serious and humble mission, and we look forward to executing it as quickly as possible.
So now you're here on site, and you've been here for a while, and you've been able to survey the damage, and now you are definitely mitigating the hazardous waste and all the debris removal, et cetera. People can opt in to have the Army Corps of Engineers come and clear the property. And it's a right of entry that is required for someone to file in order for you to come on property. So what does that allow the Corps to do? If someone fills out an ROE and says, okay, please come and handle my devastation? What does that mean? What do they get to do? What do you do?
So in response to this disaster, without a right of entry, as you know, the Environmental Protection Agency was able to go in first and remove the most hazardous of materials from the property. We called that household hazardous materials. And that phase was largely completed when the EPA finished towards the end of February. There's still some household hazardous materials that we are collecting in support of that mission for properties that were deemed unsafe. When the EP was going through their collection, we're kind of finishing that up, simultaneously to doing what you're describing right now, which is phase 2. So the election process is phase 2, is you have fire debris on your property. You need to make an election here through the LA County Public Works Division about whether you're going to perform the debris removal on your own, likely through a private contractor, through all the necessary permitting actions, or at no direct charge to you, have the federal government via the Corps of Engineers come and remove that debris for you. And that's the election process. That's the right of entry. Because this phase of the operation, property rights are still very much in effect. So for us to be on your property, you have to give us a right of entry. That's the form that everyone is affectionately calling now the ROE. And that form allows us to come on your property and perform the work. And we do it in accordance with all California and federal standards for the removal of that type of debris, which is a vast array of different types of waste streams, which I'll talk about likely here in a moment.
Yeah, okay, well, let's talk about that. First of all, what did the EPA take out? What were some of the hazardous things that had to be taken out before you could even be part of this whole process?
Yeah, so I think for the name household hazardous materials, you can kind of think of a lot of items that most folks will find in their garage or maybe underneath their kitchen sink. These are paints, these are aerosols, these are propane tanks.
Anything that can blow up and set on fire. Right.
Absolutely. But it's also lithium batteries with the EVs.
Okay.
And that was certainly a very challenging mission to collect all the lithium batteries for the EVs that burned during the fire. I'm very, very proud to say that at this moment now, all the known EVs that were in the fire impact area of the Palisades area, which includes Pacific Palisades, the unincorporated areas, and the city of Malibu, all the known EVs have been, the lithium batteries have been collected from those destroyed vehicles. It's entirely possible that we come across one that's buried underneath a collapsed garage, but at this time, the lithium battery threat is potentially completely alleviated at this point. That's household hazardous materials. That's phase 1.
Okay, now you're phase 2.
Yep.
What are the things that you were doing when you're on property?
So on a property, when we come up upon a property, there's a lot of steps that people don't see. We do a hazardous site assessment first. We have to understand the property from an engineering perspective, from an access perspective. So we have heavy machinery that we have to bring into the property. Where are we going to put that heavy machinery? How are we going to get it to the property? How are we going to safely get it off the property? Is there any unique features of this property? Are there retaining walls? Are there swimming pools? Is there a jacuzzi? Is there a buried septic tank? All that has to be diagrammed out. There's a load of pictures that are taken ahead of time. And then we're going to go through an asbestos process where we bring in a certified asbestos consultant by the state of California that comes in and surveys the property, tests the property as necessary, and then we have to do an abatement of just the asbestos materials on that property first. We're going to bring in an arborist that looks at all the associated trees on the property. They're deemed as hazardous. If they are deemed hazardous, then we'll eventually collect those trees as well. We'll cut them down, and we'll put them into the green waste stream. And then,
how can a tree be hazardous, by the way? A naive
so
question,
there's a definition for it. So I think the easy way to think of it is any tree in the fire ash perimeter that was burned right next to the house, that would be assessed as hazardous. Also trees that outside the fire ash perimeter that are deemed hazardous, 6 inches in diameter, over 4.5 feet in height, and there's a calculation, an algorithm on its fall ratio. So if that tree is deemed by an arborist that's going to die within the next 5 years and could
cause more trouble later.
Cause trouble, be a safety issue for not only the owner but also the adjacent property, potentially the public right-of-way falling onto his street. That tree would also be collected as a hazardous tree.
Got it. Okay. So, are there properties that are not eligible for your Corps to come in and deal with?
Yeah, so I would encourage folks that if you had destroyed structures on your property, absolutely submit an ROE to the county, to LA County Public Works. The eligibility determination is an evolving definition. As it stands now, you need to have a destroyed structure, private property. So this is the private property debris removal program. So it's private property that we are performing this mission on. In some cases, schools, we've performed those. The library in Pacific Palisades we're going to do here very, very shortly. So additional properties can be added later at the discretion between the state of California and FEMA and given to the Corps for execution. But for right now, it's just private property, destroyed structures.
One of the things that has been somewhat of a challenge is getting the word out and making sure that those that are eligible and those that want this debris removal to happen, because if not, it's not logical for you to pop from, one part of the debris to the other, passing back and forth. Right. What do you think the issue is with people not buying into this? Is there something about having their private insurance handle it is beneficial, or the information's not getting out, or people are not, aware that this is an opportunity for them? I mean, because that is kind of an issue, because there's a deadline here, and if you miss the deadline, you're gone.
I think it's a little bit of the fear of the unknown. Obviously, this is a completely new phenomenon for all the folks that are involved. All these different acronyms that we throw out there and the different programs and the eligibility requirements, it certainly can get confusing. I will say that our partners at LA County Public Works have done a great job on their webpage. I was just here on the webpage just yesterday taking a look at it. They do a great job walking through the insurance piece of this, which a lot of folks have a lot of questions on the insurance side. What is the collection of insurance at the back half of this disaster going to look like? So at recovery.lacounty.gov, they do a great job laying out and answering frequently asked questions for folks. The United States Corps of Engineers will not charge you anything. Again, we are working under the provisions, the statutory authorities and appropriations from FEMA. At the conclusion of this disaster, there will be a reconciliation, state of California and FEMA, on the cost of all of this. So there's never a charge from the Corps of Engineers to you directly. For folks that do not have insurance, there's never any charge. For folks that are underinsured, there's likely not going to be any charge. If you have a debris rider on your insurance policy, and it's really well explained, again, on the county's website, recovery.lacounty.gov. If you have a specified line on your insurance policy for debris removal, what you cannot have is the principle of duplication of benefits. Federal government cannot perform the work for you, and then you receive financial compensation from your insurance company for debris removal. So, but what I also like to, there's a lot of, again, misinformation out there. There's certain things that the Corps is not gonna recover from your property. We are focused on the public health threat, which is the fire ash perimeter of the burnt structures. We go 6 inches deep on the soil recovery as well. But we do not recover the adjacent driveway, perhaps a backyard patio. These are concrete flat work out there. Pools. There may be some additional trees that your insurance company deems as debris that you also want removed from the property as well. Those type of items are not included in our program. So, as an example, if you do have a debris rider and the Corps comes in and removes the vast majority of the debris on your property, but there's still what is classified as debris by your insurance company that you need to have removed, you can utilize your insurance proceeds for those features, and that gets degraded first. And then at the conclusion of this disaster, the county may come back and say, well, here was just your debris portion of your insurance. What has been degraded now, that's whatever is left over, if any, is subject to collection by the state for the debris removal done by the federal government, in this case by the Corps of Engineers. I hope that makes sense. I know it can get confusing, but again, the website does a really nice job of laying that out itemized.
What I heard you say, it's not an either or, because if you do have that opportunity within your insurance, that your insurance can come in and privately manage the remainder of what needs to be done, but there might be a reimbursement to the county of a slight amount from your insurance if you have that in your rider.
Yeah, again, whatever is left over would be subject to for the county for collection at the conclusion of this disaster, because again, you can't have duplication of benefits.
Right, sure.
You have money from your insurance policy designated for debris removal that you cannot have the federal government perform the work, the bulk, the vast majority of the debris removal, and then retain some sort of compensation from that debris rider in your insurance policy. Right. That's really the basic policy. It's the duplication of benefits that you cannot have. And so I think a lot of folks believe that the Corps will come in and perhaps you have a very significant amount of a debris removal on your policy, that the Corps is going to come in, do the work, and then just take all that money. The Corps plays no part in that.
Right.
And that is not in fact true. But you can see the reverse of that is your insurance company has highlighted that money just for debris removal. And so that's what it's being used for here. And so you're not going to get that money anyway. So again, I didn't think I'd ever be an insurance adjuster. I'm a civil engineer, but I do think it's important for folks to go to that website.
Well, this is a very unique scenario. I mean, it's like I said, it's the 10th deadliest California wildfire, and the third most devastation when it comes to property damage, et cetera. So it is complicated, but there are some very remarkable things that are taking place in order to mitigate this and in order to help with the recovery. And those of us who are not from that area and do not have property there, there is also therefore concern about what is happening to all the waste that is coming from these properties. And I know that the Army Corps of Engineers has been very careful about where this is going and how it's being separated and where it's being placed. And if you would be so kind, what is being separated and where is it being placed and what kind of hazard is that creating in another area?
Yeah, so many different waste streams, and I'll walk through them. In total, there's around 17 different facilities here in Southern California that we're utilizing for the disposal of these waste streams. All been certified by Cal Recycle, LA Sanitation, and other associated regulatory agencies here in California who have been great partners in helping us alleviate the public health threat. All of this waste right now is in an uncontrolled environment, and the goal is to get it into controlled environments regulated by the state of California. That's the goal. The different types of debris that we do have asbestos contaminated materials. They go to a specific facility. They are bagged separately on site, transported in accordance with all standards to a separate asbestos receiving facility. You do also have concrete and metals that we wash on site as we collect them from a house. So in the Palisades fire area, as an example, Temescal Canyon Road, the city of Los Angeles was incredibly gracious. Early in this process, we identified that as just a vital stretch of a artery coming right out of the Palisades, by which we have set up now, which is essentially a recycling facility there, where we consolidate both concretes and metals. So there will be some drone shots, I'm sure, that'll be out there, and some other pictures. But we have a concrete crushing plant there. We have a metal baler there. So we're washing both of those materials. We crush the concrete, we bale the metal, and then we're able to keep a lot of trucks off the road because that decreases the amount of volume per truck. And then both the crushed aggregate, or the rock, the concrete, is now an aggregate that you can use in the construction supply system here in Southern California. It goes right back into the supply system. Same thing with the metals. Goes to a metal recycling facility. There's several of them here in the Los Angeles area that we utilize. So asbestos goes one direction, metals and concrete primarily get crushed and baled on that site, recycled, reused. We do have green waste as well. So some of those periphery trees that are assessed as hazardous, those would be collected, they would be chipped, and they would be taken to a green waste facility to receive those materials. And then finally, which I think most people are concerned about, and rightfully so, is the fire ash debris, which tends to be not necessarily weight-wise, but bulk-wise, the predominance of the materials coming off the property. So when we collect all material on the property site, we utilize what we call the wet method. So there is a water trailer, a hose, it almost looks like a fire hose, and during the entire collection process, we are constantly spraying on the material to keep it saturated and wet and down, so you don't have particles entering the air. We collect that fire ash debris, we put them in Super 10 dump trucks licensed by the state of California that are lined with a very heavy plastic liner. And then when that truck is full of that wet fire ash debris, it is then wrapped with that plastic liner with a secondary tarping put over it, and then an automatic tarp that comes on top of that as well. And it's transported to different facilities in Southern California that are regulated for that type of waste streams. And so that methodology that I just described and that process has been refined really over the last 20 years. Refined over several wildfires here in California, in Hawaii, on the island of Maui, and it's really coming from a couple decades of lessons learned on how to best collect this material, transport the material, and then ultimately dispose the material in accordance with California regulations. So that's how it is done.
Along those lines, I mean, similar to Lahaina, which is a flat area, however, right next to the ocean, Palisades are hills right next to the water. And there's been a lot of concern about contamination of the water. How is that being mitigated when you are, using water, but you're also hopefully gathering up all these materials? Is there some sort of downstream protection mechanism to protect the waters off Malibu?
Yeah, so for every single property that we collect materials on, we do what's called erosion control, and you're trying to capture some of the water conveyance that you just described. So you will see along all the properties that we work on, there's these wattle structures filled with organic wood fibers that lines the perimeter of the property when we're done. We also spray what's called hydromulching on top of it. It stabilizes the soil. So you're trying to keep soils and waters contained on the site when we're complete. So there, that site obviously retains its integrity. In terms of in general runoff, I mean, there's no doubt that the material that we have now has been on site through a couple of different rain systems, and I think that's why it's most important that we expedite everything we can do to move faster with quality and safety as our guiding lights to collect this material as quickly as you can to get it from an uncontrolled environment to a controlled environment.
And I would imagine also to help with the potential of mudslides with any kind of additional rains.
Certainly.
All right, so what happens when the Army Corps of Engineers leave? I mean, do you have a deadline? How long are you going to be here?
So the president gave us a deadline of January of 26, which is again unprecedented for this kind of this expansive of a disaster in terms of the response rate and then the totality of our response. It's certainly the fastest one that we're going to experience in the Corps of Engineers, and we've done everything we can to expedite everything. And I'll try to just give a few numbers. I can get out of control with numbers.
You can say anything you want.
But I appreciate that. So right now, if you look at Pacific Palisades, unincorporated areas in the city of Malibu, the goal early on was by April we need to be clearing over 35 parcels per day. We have 78 crews as of yesterday doing the bulk debris removal. That will go to over 100. What we have is we have a 7-day average right now in March where we've already exceeded the 35 parcels per day.
Good.
In fact, our record was just this last Saturday of 45 parcels in one day, and that'll soon be eclipsed. If it wasn't eclipsed yesterday or today, it'll be eclipsed this week because we're ramping up our capacity to collect. So your goal is to get above, if you can get above 40 a day, which we will, April and May become your decisive months when we look at the fire impact area. You do 40 a day, you do 1,200 in a month. You do 1,200 a month, you do 2,400 in the months of April and May combined. By the end of this month, we'll have over 800 complete. That gets you to 3,200 parcels cleared that have been given to the government and the Corps of Engineers to execute. You do that, and we believe we'll have in and around with all the different opt-outs when people make their elections. I don't know my denominator, so it's hard to say percent complete. When I say denominator, I don't know how many total parcels that we're going to actually work. But if we assume that that's going to be a total of 5,000, you're well over 60% by the end of May.
Okay.
And the goal is to be over 60% complete with known properties that we have to work by the end of May, and then have PCH cleared as well. And we're rapidly working on PCH because of all the different environmental considerations. It's a very, very challenging problem set working on PCH. It's a vital artery for our operation. We're moving hundreds of trucks every day on PCH, simultaneously removing debris while utilities and the county do work on the road. So we have to synchronize that. So I would like to say in this interview for folks, I know it's frustrating with the restrictions on PCH now. We're doing 850 trucks a day. That's going to get to 1,200 trucks a day. We are going to strain the system. We won't break the system, but it won't be comfortable because we're trying to move fast. And maintaining PCH as it is right now so we can work, I think is critical to our operations. Again, April and May, to get to a point when you get post-Memorial Day weekend and you come into the Palisades or along PCH in June, it looks like a different world. And so that's the goal, and that's to expedite everything. And when you look at those percentages, say it is 60%. Again, I don't know how many houses we're going to do, but say it is 60% complete. Well, I know a lot of folks would say, well, you're going to be done then by the end of July. If you just linearly extrapolate that, that's probably correct. But the challenge is always in a disaster like you have some significant legal challenges with ownership disputes on properties, disputed ROEs. You may have some severe engineering challenges. So a lot of the lower percentage of properties that we're going to work, they'll string out a little bit because it's legal or potentially engineering challenges. So we will be here for 2025, and we'll be complete by January 26. But it won't look like the problem is still there largely by summertime as we work those challenges individually.
And once you have done your job and you have done what the Army Corps of Engineers can do, does that mean construction can begin? Does that mean that re-permitting can take place? Does that mean that the property is now reasonably in a position to start moving towards the build versus the recovery?
Excellent question. The short answer is yes. The rebuild process is not under the purview of the Corps of Engineers. What I will tell you, though, is that I've heard all of our partners from LA County Public Works or the different municipalities, to include LA City, unincorporated county areas, and the city of Malibu. I've heard them say is start your building permits now. Start with your architectural designs now. Start selecting your builders now if you so choose. And you can simultaneously, as we're working debris removal, start the process towards the rebuild. So I have no doubt that there's going to be construction in the Palisades or in Malibu while we're still removing debris. There's construction activities just now starting as we're still moving debris. Wow. So I would say it's not necessarily, this is not a sequential solution for folks. We're working everything overlapping. Phase 1, we overlapped with EPA. And phase 2 will certainly be overlapped with rebuild processes.
You've been doing this for decades. You said 27 years in this particular role. What did this particular project teach you? What have you learned? Because has this been work as usual, or has this been unorthodox enough that you have taken lessons from this that you will use in the remainder of your work across the world?
That's an excellent question. I think for me personally, I've spent a lot of time overseas, and many times the Army, when we're overseas, we certainly always work with partners, but things tend to be a little bit easier because you don't necessarily need to build consensus for the different problem sets that we have overseas. We can drive a solution and maybe not have to rely so much on partnerships. When you come to a community in the United States, for the most part, I'm not from Southern California. Most of our employees are not from Southern California that are working here. So we are strangers. We are guests of Southern California. So if you don't make those partnerships, if you don't understand how the community works and build those strong relationships, you absolutely cannot accomplish this mission. And I will say, and I could go through a litany of different organizations, governmental agencies here in Southern California, but they have been, without an exception, very accommodating and very understanding of the governor's order to expedite everything, and they've been fantastic. That's at the local level, state level, and certainly our federal partners that are involved in this as well. And I think that the partnership pieces of this is key. And I will say, and that's why coming on shows like this is critically important for us, the most important partner is the affected communities. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really is. We cannot perform our mission without communicating with those homeowners that lost their homes in those communities, because it's those informal leaders and homeowners associations and churches that have their members in the community. We reach them, we're able to communicate to them, answer their questions directly, get out there in the field. I think that's what moves us along faster, because then people feel comfortable making an election to go with the federal government or not, go with the Corps of Engineers or not.
Well, you've mentioned the website a couple times, but for clarity, if people, because it's an ever-changing scenario, updates, et cetera, what's the best approach? What's the best website for people to reach out?
That's recovery.lacounty.gov.
Okay.
And I like to say, because a lot of folks right now have insurance questions, they have a really good insurance page on there that's gonna walk you through that much better than I did.
This has been literally fascinating, incredibly informative, and I so appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Colonel Sawser, for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.